Hello, welcome to Staring into the Abyss. I'm your host, Richard Gerlach. With me, as always, is Matt Brandenburg.
Oh yeah, I'm here, yo.
What up, yo? We're talking like this, yo.
Oh, I'm ready for the abyss.
I found myself stuck in an animal purgatory, yo. Shit's wild.
Oh, magical.
I already got you.
It's gonna be a good one.
This episode, we don't have Vilame. She is preoccupied, but it is okay because you have Matt and myself to either annoy or entertain you, depending on your preference.
Yeah, very true.
And we're gonna be talking about some strange, surreal, and weird media.
Yeah,
that we enjoy.
Exactly.
Because we've both. Oh, I cut you off, man. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It should be a fun one.
It should be a fun one. I might talk a little bit too much about Animal Well, but we will see.
Yeah,
because I am hooked on that game.
That game is amazing. I've been enjoying it a lot.
It's honestly one of the best Metroidvanias I've ever played.
Yes. It's just so wacky. No, I love it.
It's wacky, it's fun, it's creepy a little bit too. Like,
yes. Oh God. Those some of the ghost things. I don't know how far you are in that, but
we can get a bit more into it. So I've been in most of the regions. There are 2 fast travel spaces I have not unlocked yet.
Okay.
And I just got the flame from the ostrich.
Okay.
But I haven't gotten the other flames. Like, I found where one flame is, but I can't figure out how to get to that room yet. So I went on to do something else.
Yeah.
Because whenever I hit a wall in that game, I just kind of leave the area and just adventure and go somewhere new. And you always end up finding something.
Yes. That's like the trick, the trick to that game from everything I've seen and from what I've been playing. So I did beat because there's you beat the game, but then it doesn't end. So
yeah.
I'm on that not ending part to get to the true ending.
Is that after you get all 4 of the flame things, or is there something after that?
Yeah, so you get all 4 flames. There's something you have to beat, which is terrifying. And then because you need to collect all 65 eggs.
And yeah, I've got a lot of eggs. I just unlocked the pencil.
Nice. Yes. So yeah, everyone's like, what is happening? This new game came out called Animal Well, and it's like we said, a Metroidvania. For those who don't know what Metroidvanias are, it's a combination of Metroid and
Castlevania.
Yeah, Castlevania.
Yeah, it's a side-scrolling adventure game with a wide-open map that gradually opens up the more items that you get.
Yes, and you play as an egg. And
is it an egg? I thought it was like a little blob.
I think it's an egg, but actually I have no idea yet.
Yeah, the story of this game is very implied. It's all visual storytelling.
Yeah.
The game never actually tells you where to go. It just expects you to figure it out.
And yeah, there's something, and you don't quite figure it out when you beat it the first time. I think you figure it out more when you beat it the second time. But
okay,
it's there's ghosts, there's animal ghosts. There's
I like the mice where they have the head that pops off and does a little loop around.
Yes. It's an addictive game for listeners when you start playing it, because you're like, I can get a little bit further, and then an hour goes past and you're like, well, crap, I need to stop and do something else.
I felt like the dumbest person when it took me a half hour to figure out a puzzle.
Yeah.
And then I gave up on it, and then I eventually went back to it, and I spent another half hour getting frustrated again, and then I figured it out, and it was the most rewarding thing in the world.
Yeah. It does that a lot. There's a lot of puzzles like that.
Yeah. But no, it's a really fun game. But we should go into some media that we've been consuming.
Yes.
So I saw a movie last week.
Oh, yeah.
Called I Saw the TV Glow.
Oh, so good.
You saw it too?
I did.
Dude, that honestly, that's one of the best movies of the year. Like,
Yes.
it was an incredible experience.
It's yeah. Like I need to see it again.
I do too. I feel like pretty much the premise is like our lead character, played by Justice Smith, is kind of this weird high school kid who is really obsessed with this late night kid TV show called The Pink Opaque, which is kind of like Are You Afraid of the Dark meets Buffy?
Yeah.
I think's the best way to describe it.
It's like
And,
that. Yeah.
And his dad played by Fred Durst.
Which is so crazy. I didn't realize that was him.
Yeah, that was Fred Durst. He has like one line dialogue in the whole movie.
I was looking on IMDb for something and I kind of was scrolling through the credits and I saw his name and I was like, wait, what?
It's like, that show's for girls. That's like his only line of dialogue in the movie. Yeah. He meets a high school girl who's also a loner, and she's obsessed with the show. And the two create a friendship where they bond over this television show. And then on the night of the finale, the girl goes missing and leaves behind a burned TV set and lots of questions in her wake. And really brings a lot about identity and childhood and if things are as we remember them and how we know what our true selves are and how to find who we're supposed to be and all this really deep questions that I think will get lost in a lot of people who don't understand what the movie's trying to get at.
Yeah, there's a lot to this, which is why I want to see it again. Like it, because like I can't help but look around online and see what people talk about and like a lot of it, like you can pick up or you can see. Jane,
it's a very queer and trans movie that will be lost to a lot of people who don't know the intricacies of gender and sexuality and self-identity.
That is, there's a lot. I mean, and that's where you can kind of like see a lot of that in there and just dealing with that and accepting who you are or not accepting who you are. And then also just like, that loneliness and dealing with that kind of like having, I'm trying to think what I was reading about it, but just like the Owen, the main character, and just his view on things. And it's definitely something you need to watch again. And but it's so awesome. I just loved like the visuals of it. There's, like we said, Are You Afraid of the Dark kind of concepts are in there. Buffy's in there. A little bit of Pete and Pete are in there.
Yeah. So
it's definitely set in the 90s until a certain point.
And she captures the 90s vibe perfectly too. Yes. Like as someone who grew up in the 90s, I was like, yeah.
And like what's cool is, and what like the trailer, I don't want to say the trailer's misleading, but like if you watch the trailer and you know it's made by A24, you might go in thinking it's a certain thing. And again, this is kind of coming from what I've seen people post, so it's not just a view, but you might think it's going to be a horror movie, and it's really not a horror movie. There's horror parts. There's definitely some scary
it's more
bits.
of a coming of age movie than anything else.
Yes.
But like if I were to put it in a genre, I'd put it under horror.
Oh yeah.
Because I don't feel like it fits anywhere else due to kind of its surreal or creepy nature around a lot of the events of it.
I agree. It would be like, I wouldn't know. I mean, I guess just a surreal movie, but like that's not really genre. So, but there's just some stuff in there that like it hits hard. It visually is great. Owen is just that I can't remember what his name is now. You've said it.
Justice Smith.
Yeah, he's absolutely amazing in it. There's some stuff at the end that like even just that final scene, it was just like heartbreaking. You just want to give him a hug. Oh
God, that was rough. That was so rough.
It's like just something you need to see for sure. But yeah, I just loved all of it. And I love and I don't want to spoil much because I know it's new, but just the way it plays with, even like if you were watching it somewhat on a surface level, you still get to a point where you're like, well, what's real and what's not real, and what's the actual truth of where they are and what's happening.
Well, I like the way it plays with nostalgia as well, which is like how the thing was, how you remember it versus how the thing actually was.
Oh, that was perfect. Because it's so true. As a kid, you watch certain shows and you're like, this show is amazing. Either it's horrifying or they're the best people in it. And then you watch it as an adult and you're like, what's happening here?
But like, I think, I feel that she captures a lot of stuff perfect in this movie.
Yeah.
And I would definitely, for a discussion of weird media, like, I think this is going to be a piece of weird media that like needs to be seen for its surreal nature. But also for its commentary on just like acceptance and self-acceptance and discovering yourself. Like, what was it, that scene when they meet on the bleachers and she's like, I like girls. And then he's like, I don't care about that. And then she's like, do you like girls? And he's like, I think I like TV shows.
Yeah.
And like
perfect.
Yeah, and it captures this idea of just not sure who you are as a person, self-discovery, and it's painted in a really melancholy way, but also a really beautiful way at the same time.
Yeah.
And plus you got Fred Durst in a few scenes.
And you got Pete and Pete are in this.
Yeah, you get Pete are in this.
Which I didn't realize until IMDb, and I was like, holy crap. But no,
I loved what was it? I loved when he sees I'm just a spoiler, but when he sees the show as an adult,
and
it's like, and the ice cream demon's like, I can't sell ice cream in the winter, and they're like, you can sell soup in the winter.
That was just it was so great.
It was the perfect type of 90s cheese. That was like,
yes.
I loved it.
Oh man, it was great. But yeah, it was like perfect. Like you could definitely see that as a Nickelodeon thing.
Yeah.
And like there's so much like little stuff for you watching it. Like the name of the school is basically VH, like it's Boyd High School.
It's Boyd High School. Yeah, Boyd High.
But then like the acronym is just VHS, which I thought was like perfect. It's just like little, like the posters on the wall. Like there's so much that she put in this movie that like are just subtle little things that you might not notice, or you might notice and not kind of like put it together until you get to the end of it. And it's just, which again makes it rewatchable because you kind of want to like see all of this capture everything that they were doing. And so anyway, it's an awesome movie.
It really is. Do you have we both have recommendations, but I just brought this one up. So do you have anything, Matt?
Yeah, I actually, because it has
but I have more. I think we can just go back and forth, make it easier.
Yeah. It's been a little while, I feel like.
Since it has.
So there's a couple of things that I've read, and I will call out first Carnosaur by Harry Knight Adam. This is the book that the movie Carnosaur was based on, and it's came out before Jurassic Park, but deals with a lot of that same concept of Jurassic Park, which is it's some small English town and there are dinosaurs. That's a basic concept of this. You have this reporter, crappy little reporter that's reporting on like cat shows and like food festivals and stuff like that. And he wants to be a hard-hitting reporter. And a couple murders start happening. And so he decides to take it upon himself to investigate these things. and he's not going to help his partner who he used to date, but then broke up with her because she was going to be too good for him in journalism, that is. And again, this is set in the 80s or written in the 80s, so it's very much an 80s paperbacks from hell kind of book. And we find out that there's this zoo and this rich guy, and this rich guy is making dinosaurs, and he's doing it very similar to the way they do it in Jurassic Park, except for frogs, it's chickens. But I mean, it like Michael Crichton had to have read this and said, I'm going to do this, but maybe not so pulpy, because this is a very pulpy book, and there's very certain views on women and everything like that in this that you're kind of like, oh, it's cringy now, but that was what they wrote in the time. It gets just wild. This guy that is making these dinosaurs has this like evil villain super genius idea of basically destroying the world and giving it back to the dinosaurs because they are the apex predator and they deserve to rule the world, and humans have wasted their time. So it's just absolutely bonkers. Lots and lots of dinosaur bloody action, and it's a blast. So Carnosaur.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, it's fun. It was a fun, stupid read because I mean it's ridiculous, but
I mean sometimes you need that though.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so funny because there's like just the commentary in this book is just wild. Like, again, just this idea of our main character breaking up with his girlfriend because she is a better reporter than him. Or this rich guy, evil genius guy, has a wife and just isn't interested in her physically, but still wants to keep her around, and so she has to like sleep around, and it's a whole like concept that like it's in there to be kind of a lewd concept, but is still kind of just putting women in a certain position and certain view that you're like, okay. But anyway, it does lots of dinosaur action, so that's a plus.
Well, that's what you need is dinosaur action. Well, I will say I can't report fully on it yet, but I did start the new Stephen King collection.
Oh yeah, and how is that?
The first story is fantastic.
Nice.
And the second story is predictable but still entertaining.
Is this like good?
Is what?
Is it good King or like tired?
Yeah, I'd say it's good King. Okay. I'd say this is very good King. This is King writing short fiction, and it's better than the last collection he put out.
What was that, like the cat one? I can't think of what it was.
No, that was the one with the As It Bleeds, If It Bleeds.
Yeah.
That's the one where Mike hated one of the stories that I liked, and like remember we had that big thing? Yeah.
Oh yes.
This collection, it's mostly short stories and a few novellas. The first novella of the collection is called Two Talented Bastards, and it's about these two men, and one of them has passed away, and the other one's in his 90s, and our main character is like the living old man's son. And many, many years ago, these two men went out hunting one day, and they come from like East Bumfuck, Maine, like the middle of nowhere. And they go hunting one day, and when they come back from the trip, they're mutes and extremely pale as a ghost. And within the next month, the uncle, who's always wanted to be a painter but never could successfully get there, is having a big art gallery. Our kid's father, who's always wanted to be a writer but could never get anything published, has just signed a huge publishing contract.
Okay.
And they both just ride success for the rest of their lives. And after the father dies, the boy learns the secret of what happened. It's not really as sinister as it sounds. It kind of honestly felt like a love letter to Peter Straub,
Okay.
like a tribute to Peter Straub.
Yeah.
Especially the way it was written, it felt like a Peter Straub story. Like it was Stephen King trying to write something like Peter Straub.
Huh. Well, that's nice.
And then the second story is called The Fifth Step, and it's about this man who's in Alcoholics Anonymous, and he's talking to a stranger in the park about his inability to take the fifth step.
Okay.
And it's more sinister than it sounds. But after the first couple pages, it's kind of like, oh, I know where this is going. And they get to the end, and it's like, yeah, it went there. But it's like, it's enjoyable. It's not like it's a bad story, even if it's predictable. It's still like well written, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm on the third story right now, which is called Willie the Weirdo.
Okay.
And in this book is also a sequel novella to Cujo.
I was going to ask. I thought this had a sequel to something in it.
Yeah, it has a sequel to Cujo. That one's called Rattlesnakes.
Okay. I'm trying to remember, how did Cujo end? How would this, is it just another?
I believe Cujo ends with the wife and the son dying in the car.
Okay.
And then they had to put the dog down.
So
in the movie they live. But I think I remember in the book they die.
Yeah.
But yeah, the stories are, you have Willie the Talented Bastards, The Fifth Step, Willie the Weirdo, Danny Coughlin's Bad Dream, Finn, On Slide In Road, Red Screen, The Turbulence Expert, Laurie, Rattlesnakes, The Dreamers, and The Answer Man.
Okay. Huh.
But I would just say, like, if you like Stephen King, you'll probably like this.
Yeah.
Like it's again nothing mind blowing, but good King is good King, and when King's kind of writing at his best, it's kind of hard for, in my opinion, it's just a nice, cozy, comfortable writing style to fall into.
Yeah.
But Matt, what about you?
Yes. So I read. I'm trying to decide what I should talk about. I just
have one more thing, so that we can go to the weird media stuff after.
Cool. Okay, so I'm currently reading, and I'm almost done with Charles Beaumont's Perchance to Dream Selected Stories. So this is a collection. Charles Beaumont, he wrote like 20 or 30 episodes of Twilight Zone. He is a writer. So that's real helpful. No, anyway, he was part of this like little group of writers, which had like Ray Bradbury and a couple of other pulpy writers that also worked with Twilight Zone. So back in that time. And so this is kind of it's a Penguin Classics, and there's like 25 or 30 stories in here. It's crazy, but they're all kind of short, and it's good. You can see like, so Ray Bradbury does the intro to this and like talks about this Charlie kid and just like how he was just like a kid when he kind of joined this group, and he very much followed the Ray Bradbury of like writing a story. I can't remember if Ray Bradbury said the story a day or a story a week, but like one of those where you just kind of keep writing stories and eventually something good will happen. And he would do a lot of this like idea, like just one kind of crazy idea, and then just take it, and they would it sounded like a really neat group. Like this group, they would all like kind of meet up and come up with a wacky idea, and then they each had to write their own story for that idea. And so anyway, that's what this is. A lot of that is this. It's one interesting concept that he just takes a story to, and a lot of them, because it kind of follows a little bit of that Ray Bradbury idea of like not quite a gotcha moment, but kind of that like one big twist and or that magicalness that Ray Bradbury always kind of followed. So there's stories in here. One's called Free Dirt, and it's about this guy who basically the cheapskate will do everything he can to get stuff for free. And, like he pretends to be homeless so he can get money, and he borrows stuff from people but never pays them back, and like collects coupons or returns things after it's pretty much all empty so he can get money back, and does all these like contests on the radio, because again it's like the 60s, 70s. And anyway, there's a cemetery that's selling free dirt, or not selling, that doesn't make sense. There's a cemetery that's giving away free dirt. And so this guy is just like, okay, I want that because it's free dirt. Maybe I'll grow like food. And because he won all these free seeds. So he does all that, and it just turns into this like thing where the food, like he has to keep collecting dirt, and he keeps stealing more dirt from the cemetery when they don't have free dirt. And then in the end, it turns out like it's growing people. So stories like that, and that whole like concept that actually talks about in the intro, Ray Bradbury does, where he's just like, yeah, I was driving down the road and I saw a sign for free dirt in front of a cemetery, and so I told my group, and Charlie wrote the story about it. So it's a lot of stuff like that, a lot of like gotcha moments, and like actually really like some really weird stories. There's a story about this dude that, and I can't remember what the title is, unfortunately, because I don't have the book in front of me, but basically this dude that like he always wants the best of everything, and he he sets up a computer program to find the best women in every like in the world, and he wants to sleep with all the best women. And so he figures out some formula where because it turns out it's some crazy number, so he's got to like this huge path that he's got to go and do this, and he figures out a way to trick these women through pheromones to sleep with him. And so it's so bonkers because he does this thing, but he's like really worried that like his formula is going to change because women are going to turn, like girls are going to grow up, and so then there's going to be new women in this list. And so he like it was like so weird to read this, where you're like, this would not happen today. This is not be a story somebody would write. But he goes through and he does this all, and then he's like talking to a doctor because his body's just like deteriorating because he's not eating and he's not sleeping because he's got to have sex with all these women. And he and I really don't care if I spoil this one. It turns out like the doctor he's talking to was actually one of the women that he wanted to sleep with, but the doctor thought that he was not, basically thought that his wife was having an affair with somebody. And this guy's like, no, I'm not having an affair. I just want to sleep with your wife. And he ends up killing. So it's like so ridiculous, but like this dude, this Charles Beaumont, just like wrote this story. And so it's just like it's something. It's a story to experience. It doesn't go into any of those details, but just this concept of him like traveling the world to sleep with all these women. It was just like, what is happening? So anyway, it's fascinating. Some of the stories are not as like, they're okay. It does fall on that, and I swear I've talked about it before. There was like this trend back then of like gotcha kind of twist ending stories where it's just some sort of thing that's gonna happen at the end, and the whole story is based on this one like gotcha at the last sentence kind of thing. So you're always kind of reading it, looking for that, and we don't really do that anymore. I think that was like an older trend, and that's fascinating to see when you read a lot of short stories written in the last, I'll say 20 years. They don't really fall into that like get you moment, but like I think that was part of the trend back then because of more magazines were putting out stories that you could buy. Not to say that there is anymore, but I think we have moved beyond that kind of style, and so it's fascinating to read that style now. So Perchance to Dream, selected stories, Charles Beaumont. It's an interesting one to check out. If you like Ray Bradbury, you'll probably really like these because it kind of has that same idea.
Sweet.
Yeah.
So on a totally different turn, I have been watching. So I decided to get a subscription to this thing called Dropout, which is
Okay.
like College Humor streaming service.
Nice.
If you like the Dimension 20 stuff, they have all the Dimension 20 campaigns if you want to like watch that stuff. I was sold because I saw clips from the show called Smarty Pants,
Okay.
and it's like one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my life. Each episode they get three different comedians that work with College Humor and Dropout to give a presentation of their choosing.
Oh, nice.
And no one knows what the presentation is until they go and give it.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
The presentations range from when is the best birthday? What cartoon characters are invited to the cookout? Vegetables are a lie.
Oh, I love it.
There's also wrestling is drag.
Nice.
Which cryptid is the best one to blaze with? And why eggs are the best and most nutritious food for you.
Oh my god.
And there's also why we need to have a swing music resurgence. Why white woman emails are the superior emails. And why we need to bomb the moon.
Wow. So like the comedians, they have no time to prep. They just have to talk about this.
Oh no, that's it. They have the whole slideshow presentation with it.
Oh, oh, I love it.
It's like they're doing a whole slideshow presentation as they're going through it.
That is amazing.
Like I think one of my like favorite quotes from it is like he's talking about like smoking with Bigfoot. He's like, Bigfoot or Sasquatch, pros, empathetic listener. You know, he's fun to hang around. He'll have a deep conversation with you. He's got big opposable thumbs so he can roll some fat doobies. And then he's like, cons. He's a big fan of resin. In fact, he's actually kind of a fiend for resin.
Oh my god.
And he's going to want to crash at your place, which will result in shedding. And then they're like, and if your question for asking me this is why? Why are you doing this? Why? Then you are a buster. And you need to bust out Buster. Take all that big brain clown shit out of here because I'm trying to get piff with a mythical creature.
Oh my god.
And like it's a whole slideshow he's going through as he's doing this too.
I love it.
And like that's just the premise of the show. Is just each episode is a new presentations that are given. And they're all really funny so far. The favorite part of like the cookout one is like the guy who presented the one about the cookout, he had these pre-written cards that after he hit a certain point, he'd give the card to the white guy in the audience and have him read it. And like this one was like, hey, it's me again, the white guy. What is the cookout?
Oh my god, that's amazing.
Like it's a really funny show. Like honestly, like I'm happy with my $5 spent for the month just to watch this because it's really funny. So yeah, I recommend those. But shall we get into our discussion?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Well, we talked about Animal Well for a little bit at the beginning of class, at the beginning of this episode, which is kind of like what sparked this conversation because Matt and I have both been really into Animal Well.
Yes.
But we're also generally fans of weird media as well, like talking about I Saw the TV Glow, David Cronenberg movies, Thomas Ligotti. Like we're all into that stuff. Wait, speaking of, I'm just going to pause the discussion real quick. Matt, did you order Michigan Basement?
I did.
Okay, good. Me too. Anyway, back on top of the conversation. It just came into my head. But yeah, why don't we go over some of our types of like either weird video games, weird media, things that inspired us.
Yeah.
And I would say, honestly, I'd consider this to be more on the weirder aspect of things. But you want to know what my first taste of the weird was?
Yes. What was it?
Call of Cthulhu: Dark Corners of the Earth for the Xbox,
Oh,
which is a video game based on the Shadow of Innsmouth.
nice. That was on the Xbox?
That was on the Xbox, the original Xbox.
Wow. Okay.
Back in high school. It ran on the Morrowind engine.
That's crazy.
Yeah. No, I had a copy back when I was in high school on the original Xbox. Did you ever play that game though?
No.
That game's fucking wild. It's literally the Shadow over Innsmouth, but in video game form.
That's crazy.
And they also managed to tie it into the Call of Cthulhu a little bit.
Nice. That's
but
wild.
it's pretty much like the game opens with your character raiding a Cthulhu cult peep thing, and goes insane and wakes up in an asylum and tries to kill himself. And then, like years later, he's now a PI. And he's sent to go to Innsmouth to investigate something. And he discovers the fish people and the Diggin cult and how they want to sacrifice him.
Oh my
and
gosh.
At the same time, which I actually didn't realize how the central metaphor in the show over Innsmouth is super racist until recently. Because I was reading the manga adaptation of Shadow over Innsmouth, and man, that metaphor is super racist.
Yeah. Just a bit.
Yeah. But I will say, like, for me, that was one of my first tastes of the weird. Was like I was super intrigued by this, super into this, and it kind of made me want to dive in more.
Yeah. So, like, are we okay?
You guys talk about some weird stuff.
Weird stuff. So, okay. I think, like, oh man, I mean, like, it's so
There's too much. There's too much.
There's a lot. And one of the things, thinking about this, and like, of course, we talked about, there's lots of weird fiction. There's H.P. Lovecraft, there's Thomas Ligotti, what's his name that did the White People,
Arthur Machen.
Yeah, Arthur Machen. So like, there's a lot of that, but I'm like,
well, you think of like actually video games and TV shows.
Well, that's
like movies,
exactly.
We don't see it as often represented in those forms.
No, and so like that's what I've been like kind of thinking about, and just kind of when you brought this up, and just different things, and like I guess like the first thing I don't know what the first like. It's so tricky because you growing up in the 80s and 90s, there's a lot of weird cartoons and stuff like that worked. I mean, like you could argue Ren and Stimpy is a very weird cartoon, but I'm not going to go into that. I think actually a little bit older self of myself, yeah, I think like the really big splash for weird was a lot of the like 2010s Adult Swim. Just
oh god, yeah,
a lot about that, right? And like the big one that kind of blew up, and it's crazy to think how that it's kind of old now, which is like Too Many Cooks.
Dude, Too Many Cooks is amazing. I still love that video.
Exactly, and that is like a weird example, like a weird media example that was actually like on TV. And like, I mean, like besides some of the other stuff that like obvious talk about, like Twin Peaks and X-Files.
Well, there's also like archival footage of a bear.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, that was on TV. That was fucking weird as hell.
So like that idea of twisting something.
Adult Swim tapped into some really weird stuff back then.
Yes, they like found like a really cool niche that was like is different weird, and like I think is something for anyone that's writing weird or looking for weird. Definitely look up Too Many Cooks if you haven't seen it, or even if you have seen it, watch it again, because it goes places that you don't expect, and like some of its silliness, like Snarf or whatever the cat thing is.
But also
and,
it's like creepy too.
Yes, it gets extremely creepy and like plays with what you were familiar with on those types of TV shows, and like just it's just a bizarre thing that like you just one of the like moments where you're like, this is really weird. Besides, again, like I said, Twin Peaks was definitely a weird show, and like all these other people we've talked about, all have done weird, but just kind of picking more outside of
Yeah.
that. And Too Many Cooks is definitely one that I would recommend, is something weird because it sets you up one way and then takes you somewhere that you don't expect, and there's no explanation of why this is happening or what's happening. So that
Well,
that one
keeping it on Adult Swim, because I think Adult Swim's a great concept to talk about weird and bizarre
yeah.
and like out there stuff. Have you been watching Smiling Friends?
No.
I'd recommend Smiling Friends.
I want to, like, it's there, I just haven't watched it yet.
It is one of the most bizarre shows I've ever seen in my life. But like it's one of those things. So like, Smiling Friends is a comedy. It's not so creepy. But I will talk about Smiling Friends because I think it fits into this discussion. But you also have stuff like The Shivering Veil that's on Adult Swim, and that was like pretty creepy and weird and strange.
Yeah.
And you just had like I like how Adult Swim was a bit more experimental, a bit more out there,
Yeah.
trying a bit more different things.
Well,
But like oh, you go.
It was just like real quick on that is like what's interesting if you kind of think about that, like that time, we'll say the 2010s, is, I mean, obviously I think it was like a new way to explore, and like that really blew up on YouTube, and like I think that's where we started seeing an exploration outside of the norm, outside of, even though Adult Swim is TV, I think it really blew up because it was on YouTube. And
Yeah, I think so too.
You know, like obviously it had books and shows and movies and stuff like that, but I think 2010s is when we started seeing people explore outside of the norm and trying to find different ways to play with things and do weird things. So anyway, that I think that's where Adult Swim really helped, because a lot of that stuff that I watched it on YouTube because it was on at like it was like midnight or 2 a.m. or whatever on Adult Swim. So it wasn't something you had to be watching Adult Swim at that time to catch it.
Yeah.
Where because it was on YouTube, you could just go to it, and then everyone was sharing it and talking about it. So I think that is how it really blew up.
Did I ever tell you that I fell for the Adult Swim April Fool's episode one time?
God, no.
Okay. There has to be context for this, okay? The context is this is about 3 years, maybe 4 years, before The Room had become a meme. This is before anybody knew what The Room was. The Room was a thing for a select few group of people. Like it wasn't all over the YouTube yet. Like no one knew what this was. It didn't have the cult meme status it has now. Okay, it's midnight. I am about 5 bowls deep. I'm pretty baked. Okay, I put on Adult Swim because that's what you do when you're that stoned, you know.
Yeah.
And they're playing a movie, and the Adult Swim program on the TV just says April Fool's Day special with no information. And they're playing a movie. And the thing I noticed right away is this movie's really bad. And I keep on watching it. And there's commercial breaks. I sit through them. And I keep on watching it. And then I get to the end. I finish the movie. And I realized that the April Fool's joke was Adult Swim got me to watch a really shitty movie.
So they made you watch The Room?
Yeah. Which I can appreciate now in context of it being a meme, but at the time it was like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Because like I didn't say it was 4 years. It was definitely before it became a meme. Because once it was like on a meme and all the YouTube reviews are coming out of it, I'd already seen it.
Yeah.
So like I know it was before that. So Adult Swim was ahead of the curve on that.
That's so
But I
funny.
wanted also. I think we have time for kind of like one more media that I think's inspired both you and me.
Yeah.
That we found thanks to YouTube. And I think you know what I'm referring to.
I might.
Don't hug me, I'm scared.
Oh God, yes. That, yes, 100%.
That was discovering that video series was super influential for me,
Yes.
but also weird and horrifying.
Oh my God, 100%. Yeah. I yes, especially because like when you watch that first one, um, it takes a little bit to get into the surreal and the weird, and I
Yeah.
mean it's still weird because it's these like puppet people and they're talking to a notebook, but you're kind of like, well, this is just like a weird kid show. But they had a good job. They did an amazing job of like easing you into this weirdness and going into the horrifying and bizarre, and it's just
Did you
just
see
so
the
genius.
Did you see the TV series that they made?
I watched I think the first 2 or 3 episodes, and then I haven't had a chance to continue it.
Oh, dude, you gotta watch episode 6. You gotta make it through to the end. It is becomes some of the most bizarre shit I've ever seen in my life. And also depressing and emotionally heartbreaking.
Oh wow.
Um yeah, there's one episode just about going to work and working
Yeah.
until you saw that one of the jobs when like working until you die.
Yes.
The
Oh my God.
best is the last one is like I won't spoil exactly what happens, but one of the characters gets the book that has all the answers to everything, and they can finally find the truth about everything. And you, because that's what's been going on. Is they always want to find the truth, you know.
Yeah.
And before they can even read the book, they end up causing Yellow Guy to lose his intelligence to read the book.
Oh
And
my
then the
God.
episode ends with him throwing the book in the shredder that has all the answers to everything they ever wanted.
Oh my God. That's just amazing. Well, I just love it because like they specifically the five, we'll say the 5 original ones.
Honestly, those 5 original ones are fantastic.
Yeah, and there's such like a story behind what's happening. Like there's just little things that they show you that they don't explain, but you can kind of get an idea of like what's happening. Of like there's missing posters, and there's the
Yeah,
dad that sort of shows up in every single episode, and like clearly they're making a show, but they don't realize they're making a show, and just all this stuff. And again, that like taking the weird, and I think that's what the weird can does really well is like play with your expectations, where it's not just a monster chasing you or a serial killer or a ghost. It's like there's a ghost, but that's because the ghost is the person reading the book that you are in or whatever. And that's where the weird comes in, where it's just unsettles your mind in a different way than just the fight or flight response. It's more like what is real and what's not real. So they do a great job with that. And that's the parts of weird that I love. And that's where like Legati does that so well, where he plays with your idea of who you are and what the world is, what's happening kind of behind the world, the whole
yeah.
stage concept of us all in a stage. And and the puppet masters are stupid and they don't know what they're doing, but they're still controlling us. So that's
This is
the
a
fun
trifle.
thing. Yeah, exactly.
It's just a trifle.
Just a trifle.
But no, like, I feel like there's a lot of really weird, bizarre media that like we don't realize has become such a big influence on everything as well.
Yeah, and that's like, yeah, and that's kind of where I was thinking for my little last part, because I know we're getting close to time.
Yeah.
Is just like looking outside of, again, the norm. Like I said, with Adult Swim and YouTube, I think YouTube and other podcasts are definitely the newer edge of kind of weirdness. And I'm also seeing a lot of zines coming out, which is pretty cool. But like,
oh, dude, I love how zines making a comeback.
Yeah. So like, I think that's a cool spot where you can play with the weird, but just thinking of like YouTube and specifically like what Kane Pixels is doing, and even like Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared, that like it is big because of YouTube. Or there's just so many like people exploring and doing things there that like wouldn't be done in a studio. And podcasts are doing things that aren't done really on like that you could do in a book. Like I was gonna bring up like Welcome to Night Vale is a great example of a weird thing. I don't even know if that's still going, but that was always like a weird kind of NPR broadcast for those who don't listen, and it's about this town Night Vale, and it's just this weird. If you read Matthew,
who lives inside your walls.
Yeah, exactly. And like if you read Matthew Bartlett, you'll get there's not total parallels, but it's that idea of like talking about a certain place and just all the weirdness in that place. And so that's like a great example of somebody taking a podcast concept and twisting it to make it seem like it's real, but obviously very weird things are happening and it's not real.
Yes.
So like those are the areas that I would explore and look for the newer weird stuff. I mean, obviously stories, and people are doing some really cool things with books and movies and everything like that. But I think the cutting edge more visually is definitely going to be YouTube. You're going to find some really cool weird things.
Also, I want to give a shout out to some of this as well. I've put in an order for one of these books, but there's a publisher in Italy called Hollow Press.
Okay.
And their website is just hollow-press.net. You can only buy their products from their website, nowhere else. They sell Japanese manga, but like very specific artists they only go with. It's more experimental stuff. They also have American comics, again, more experimental stuff. European art books and comic artists, also more experimental. Then they have a game section where they make tabletop games.
Nice.
But this is what I'm getting at. They have created a fake video game strategy guide that they're releasing in volumes.
That's awesome.
And it's called Vermis.
Okay.
And there's 2 volumes. The first one is just called Volume 1, Lost Dungeons and Forbidden Woods. And the Volume 2 is called Mists and Mirrors. And all it says is... One second. I'm trying to get to the right page of the website here. All right. So open up Vermis. And it just says here, all it says for the description is, which flesh is your flesh? And the book itself has like 16-bit like style art. Like there's one of this man who's eyeless and looks like the top half of his skin to his skull is removed. And you can see his bones, like his ribs through his skin. And he's kneeling over a well. And the page just says, a corpse kneels beside the well. Mesmerized by the reflection of its living flesh, it wonders what could have been done and could have been. And for a long time the moon shines. The feeble illusion will prevail. There's one here of this guy in a robe, and you can see his beard coming through his robe, and where his head is a skull-shaped stone. And he's called the Stone Scholar. And it just says, a stoneless scholar is condemned to a miserable, pitiful life, unable to see or smell due to the scars from the rocks that were tied to their faces for ages. Stripped of their knowledge and powers, they crawl in search of the enlightenment they lost.
It's amazing.
And like literally every page is just like different monsters or maps or enemies or parts of this world, and they're full of lore of this world.
That's awesome.
There's one that's just a floating head with what looks like a ratty beard going down to the water, and it just says, the visage of an old man slowly emerges from the water in complete silence. His eyes are hollow like a mask, and his jaws detached from his head, poorly tied to his beard. You hear a voice inside your head. And then it just says, everlasting shadows cast by the forbidden fires, rotting beds with silver sheets, hastening for the colds. And then the other one is, our eyes are backwards. And then the visage disappears.
That's awesome.
Like, it's just such a cool, unique, weird project.
Yeah.
That, like, Volume 1 right now is out of print, but I know they're trying to get a new batch in soon. I did order Volume 2, Myths and Mirrors. And you can read them in any order. It's not like it's like a straight narrative. It's just game lore, essentially.
That's so cool.
Well, it's a really cool, unique concept of, like, this idea of a game that making a guide for a game that doesn't exist.
Yeah. No, I love that.
And, like, it's just something different. And one other I'd put in for weird media as well, and then we'll probably wrap things up, that I'd recommend. There's a video game series you can buy on Steam. They're cheap, and they're called Fear and Hunger.
Okay.
There's the first one's called Fear and Hunger 1. The second one's called Fear and Hunger 2 Terminus. I will say the second one's a better game, and you can play it without playing the first game, but they are connected. And they're both, they play like JRPGs, but they aren't really JRPGs. They're more kind of like immersive sims.
Oh, that's cool.
But like, for instance, in the first game, you choose a character, they're called to go to this dungeon and rescue somebody. Once you're inside this dungeon, things start to get weird. Trigger warning, especially for the first game, sexual assault. Just gonna put that out there. A lot of sexual assault.
Oh, geez.
Like, there's one enemy where if they defeat you, they added in a scene that shows an enemy assaulting your character.
Jeez.
And then your character can only crawl because his legs have been removed.
Oh my god.
And then you fall down a hole to a flesh pit of corpses where then something else eats you.
Oh my god. That's messed up.
The second game, they toned that down a bit because they got feedback of the sexual assault that people were like, hey, we'd rather either have a warning or an option to turn this on and off. Because for the most part, a lot of it seemed like it was just here to shock you.
Yeah.
And they kind of took that feedback and they lessened it in the second game.
Nice.
But the premise is your character needs to find a person and take him out of the dungeon. But when you find that person, he begins saying, I can't go further. I can't go further. And really, there's a second part to the dungeon that ties into a world of old gods and ancient beings who feed off of the pain and strife of humans. And your character might be involved in the creation of the god of Fear and Hunger. And Fear and Hunger 2 is a continuation of that, only it goes from medieval to like a World War II type setting.
Nice. And
your characters start on a train and end up in this town where it is the Festival of Termina for the next 3 days. And in this Festival of Termina, the moon drives everybody who lives in this town insane, and they begin murdering each other. And by day 3, the survivor's the winner.
Nice.
And this also ties into the gods and like weird eldritch beings and something that the first one does too. But yeah, I will say if you want something weird or different, I'd recommend those games.
That sounds awesome.
But yeah, I'd say this was a nice, good recommendation, weird fiction talk, Matt.
Yeah, definitely.
And where can listeners get in touch with you?
Yeah, I am on Twitter at BrandenburgDM, and I have a website, matt-brandenburg.com.
Thank you. And you can follow me on Twitter at Into Staring. There's also the Twitter for Abyss. And this is your Gerlach saying, keep staring.